2, 1. All aboard for Fragments of Silicon. Next stop, Season 8.
All right, welcome to the Season 7 finale of Fragments of Silicon. It's certainly been, I don't know, it's been a fairly long season, but then again, they all are. Because, well, every season runs about 6 months.
And we've run enough episodes of the season to basically have a second season inside of it.
Once again, that's usually the case these days because, we count 26 episodes, but that's really only the Wednesday show. That doesn't even include the reviews and, the European interviews. I couldn't tell you how many actual recordings we've done this season.
Talk to your nose.
Well, it's like not even that because that doesn't include the E3 stuff.
Touché.
So, yeah, we've done a lot this season, and, I'm personally looking forward to the break, but we will have content during that time because, well, we've got to keep content numbers up. I mean, I'll admit channel growth for our first season on Twitch has been steady but slow. But as far as Twitch is concerned, we were just starting out. Mm-hmm. But we're almost to our first goal. So just 5 more people.
Bring your friends.
It's something that should happen, anytime. Like, hard to predict. But anyway, joining me this broadcast are the usual suspects: Ogre,
Turtle,
Alex,
hello,
Petty.
What'd I do this time?
And Twilight.
Hello.
All right, let's get to the news. Let's see, Galix, why don't you go?
Well, work continues to be stressful, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But aside from that, I finally finished Breath of the Wild over the 4th of July weekend because I had a little extra time. The final boss is easy, kind of, but it's fun.
Apparently, you can make it harder by going to it earlier.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you beat all of the other bosses, you don't have to fight them in a gauntlet before it. And if you don't finalize beating the dungeons, his life doesn't get cut in half first. But that still doesn't change the fact that most of what you have to do is sort of interesting, but not really technically challenging really as much. So I'm enjoying that. I started building a Gundam model again because I got back into it a little bit at PortCon, so that's fun. I'm finally going to finish that Dahak that I had to get a second copy of because I lost some pieces the first time.
That's never good.
Yep. I got my car back with no further issues, so that was nice. After having to have a rental while it was being repaired, so that was also nice. Other than that, pretty uneventful. I guess I'm looking forward to the weeks off to not have too much that I have to play for the show. So I'll be able to play more discretionary stuff.
Now, remember, we do start our seasons with reviews, so...
Oh, I know. It's still for like a week or so.
Point taken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other than that, I guess I don't have a whole lot going on. Maybe I'm just boring.
Alright.
You're boring. You haven't met me in person.
Well, Ogre, why don't you go?
let's see. Well, Naka started uploading Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy the other day.
Yeah, not a surprise. Not a surprise.
Not really, no.
Now, is
I mean,
Mega Man
it-
5 Game Boy exclusive, or was there
Yes.
Alright,
That
because...
version, yes.
Well, yeah, you can get it on like the 3DS, and I'm assuming other virtual
Well, I mean,
consoles
back in
may
the
have it.
day, I didn't know if there was
Yeah,
like
back-
also an NES version or...
No. This was just straight up for the Game Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only one of the Game Boy games that isn't like mostly a remix.
Yeah.
Which is why they're doing it. Because
And it
And-
has cameo boss battles sort of from the unique characters from the first four. So
Yep.
you at
We
least
talked-
you don't get to use Anchor, Quint, and Bellade's weapons, but you at least get to fight them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do at least talk about that when we get to them. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, we just finished that up last week. So, got something else to set up here soon,
Mhm.
which hopefully leads us open to, I don't know, some quote-unquote bigger games to do.
Not quite Super Mario or Paper Mario.
No. I'm gonna be honest. I really wanted to do Dragon Quest VIII this year, but after Color Splash took about half a year, that ain't happening.
Like,
And there ain't no need for Naka to say anything. It's like, no.
This should only
think
take a
we're-
couple months. It's 6 months later.
I think we're on a very strict one RPG a year if kind of rule. So
like, well, I suppose there, there's 4 Homestar Runner episodes you still have to cover. So
there's
Yeah.
plenty we can do, but we'll
I know.
get we'll figure out when we get to it.
Yeah.
I usually like to plan ahead, but like I said, that Color Splash kind of threw everything off guard.
Color Splash drained you.
Yeah, very pun very much intended.
Yes.
Let me see. Other than that, I RSVP'd for their wedding this weekend. I got the invitation the day after he apparently sent them out in the mail.
Oh,
Huh.
well, that's happening. Congratulations to them.
Yep,
If
that
they're
is
listening.
definitely happening. Barry's actually out of town for the holiday weekend.
Ah.
Because I got over there. We had some cherries, and I was going to share it with them. And got there, and I go like, oh, Barry's not here. He goes like, yeah, she's out for the weekend. She didn't
Right.
come back till Sunday, which made a hell of a difference because we didn't actually start recording until like 7 at night when we were supposed to do it at like 5 in the evening. So we spent 2 hours BSing with each other, and I didn't leave that place until like close to 9.
Jeez.
And he still had to eat dinner, so she is sorely missed when she leaves.
What, did you crack the whip?
Oh, well, she usually, when she starts moving to the back room, it's like, yeah, we need to start doing this.
It's a good timing cue.
Yeah.
So
But,
when are they getting? So when are they getting married?
September 2nd,
Oh, neat.
before Labor Day.
Uh.
So it'll always be easy to remember your anniversary. That's my advice to anybody gets married. Do it near or on a holiday, and you'll always fucking remember.
God, how long have they been together now? Like 5 years?
I don't think it's been that long.
I
I think it's been like
I think they've
3 or
known each
something
other
like
for
that?
5 years, but actually been going out for like 3.
yeah, something like that. It's been a long time, so it's
Yeah.
not surprising that they're getting married.
But let's see. So, and I get to be the best man, so I got to plan all that stuff the best man does.
Yeah,
Of
I
course.
remember when I was best man at my brother's wedding.
But
Almost
me
lost
see.
the brain.
other than that, let's see. My dad's gonna go to my sister's place because her husband's getting deployed for the next 7 months.
Mm.
So, well, they live nearby, so it's not that big of a trek or anything.
Oh, so it's not like
but-
a cross-country trip or something like that.
No, not anymore. She used to live in Alaska for a while. So,
Oh, jeez.
God.
yeah, and then
Wow.
in Illinois, and then they finally just moved back in Ohio near us. So it was like, sheesh.
Military life is rough.
It is rough, but he should be fine. He's going down to well, let me just say it's a bay of some sort that near where some pigs used to be, but that's about as much as I'll say.
Hmm.
Let's see. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Oh yeah, give in to the stillness of eternity.
Right, moving on. Twilight.
Let's see now. Not really much been going on this past week. It's been warm and rainy, and yesterday my mother injured her hand when she was helping a friend out with some stuff.
Hmm.
It's swollen up some, but I don't think anything broken in it. She didn't go to the hospital to have it checked. She's always been stubborn about stuff like that, but she's got it wrapped up in a cast-like thing. I'm gonna wait till Monday to see if it swelling goes down. Hopefully it does. Nothing goes wrong. Besides that, I've been watching SGDQ and been working. That's about it.
I
Oh,
heard
yeah,
they
it's
set a new
SGDQ.
record during that.
If they did, I missed it.
Well, one of the brief periods where I was watching, I think last night, they got like a $10,000 donation.
I think it was like a Castlevania thing. They got a
Oh, like broke a
one of
world
the Castlevania
record.
games. Yeah, they broke a world record during it.
Was that?
I
Was
wish
that
they had
Dracula's
like
Curse,
a
I
web.
think?
I wish they had like a website where they'd post, what all games they've broken world records on stream are.
That doesn't exist.
Not officially.
Hmm.
Somebody probably has one. I just haven't felt like looking for it.
Right. At any rate, anything else?
Nothing else.
All right, you're up, Betty.
Well, my computer, like when I'm playing Final Fantasy 14, has been blue screening for a few times, and I was wondering why. And then
I love this.
And then I was like, wait a minute, when was the last time I cleaned out my radiator for my water cooler? Pops off fan. Oh, there's my problem.
Yeah,
Radiator
he
was
sent
clogged with dust. Yeah.
Sent a picture to it in the Discord for our free company, and oh my god.
Fix that right up. And yeah, now my computer's been running much better. Omega came out, Normal came out in Final Fantasy 14, and I beat that with the free company, so it's interesting, but I'm kind of concerned what they're going to make us do in Savage.
Did they use the same old gangly robot design, or did they use one of the coolerized ones?
We're not getting to Omega till like a year and a half from now.
Yeah.
Oh, just the beginning of the series of
Yeah,
things
this is
that
just
he'll
the
be
beginning.
the final boss of.
Yeah.
Without getting too deep into spoilers, basically this is Universal Survival Arc.
Yeah, it's the Universal Survival Arc for the Final Fantasy series.
We're fighting notorious monsters and iconic villains from other Final Fantasy games. I'm not going to say what they are yet, because that is huge spoilers.
And not just Gilgamesh, because he doesn't fucking count.
Well, Gilgamesh is already in the game.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. We call him Greg.
That's not a joke. They actually nicknamed him Greg.
I'm curious as to why, but sure.
Because Greg is easier than Gilgamesh.
Also, Hildebrand's an asshole.
If you've ever met the... what's the detective's name?
Hildebrand.
Hildebrand, yeah. If you ever met him, it makes too much sense why he's named Greg.
Okay.
Also, they are still shooting off fireworks out around my house, so if they get picked up, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. And I've just been trying to figure out what games I want to play during the off season, like for stream. Yeah, I still have some games that I bought with the GameStop gift card I got for my birthday, so don't know if I want to stream some of those or more God Eater or Final Fantasy, or we'll figure it out.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah. Speaking of, I suppose it's a good time to shift to mine news. Now, there's not much in the way of actual news. It's been a quiet week. Like, it was a really quiet 4th of July. More quiet than I'm usually used to because it's been so rainy lately.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not complaining. Like fireworks are annoying. Like Fourth of July was not. The 4th of July was never a holiday I particularly liked. It was more my older brother's thing.
I like it. It's just we haven't had the money to get fireworks for the past few years.
I kind of got over fireworks like 20 years ago or so.
I always liked it, but I was always afraid of the loud banging sound. So
keep in mind I live in Florida. Like the fireworks are not hard to get.
You get the fun stuff.
I think they made fireworks legal in Maine like less than a decade ago.
Yeah, here it's not as much as they're illegal in town. Like some places, it's just you technically need a permit. But as long as you're not trying to launch them as long as you're not trying to do stupid shit with them, they don't care.
You don't need shit to buy fireworks here in Florida. At least last I checked. I mean,
minor ones I think you can do around here just easily. I don't know though.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously you can't use M80s around here because duh.
Mostly, just the thing is that I've never. The town I live in has a summer festival in later July, so we don't really do 4th of July. But sometimes you can hear the ones from the next town over.
Indeed. At any rate, I have actually been playing games that aren't for the show for fun. Trust me, it's a rarer event than it used to be because got to play 2 games a week, week in, week out. And I think that's about it. Actually, as far as news, well, I suppose I should mention that. That can wait for the end of the show, actually. So, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is, a developer of a very long and storied career. It's been a while since we've had a veteran on the program, whose career spans back to like the early mid 80s kind of deal. So it's my great pleasure to welcome David Fox of Electric Eggplant, Terrible Toy Box, and originally of Lucasfilm Games.
Hey there.
Hey, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Glad to be with you guys.
Indeed. Right. So, usually with these interviews, we like to begin at the beginning. And I suppose the first question to ask is, what got you interested in video games and the video game industry?
Well, when I was growing up, there were no video games. During my childhood, they did have arcades, but they were all mechanically based machines. And I liked them, but never thought I'd end up doing anything related to games. I actually, probably in the mid 1970s, I had the idea that I'd love to work on some sort of a future interactive theme park experience, kind of imagining like a Disneyland, but it being totally interactive as opposed to just passive. And figured, okay, I need to learn about computers and about games. And my wife and I opened a public access microcomputer center in 1977, and we had 10 computers to start. Eventually had, I think, 40 of them. And this is a nonprofit, so kids in schools and birthday parties would come into our center and rent time on the computers and play games, and we teach classes. And during that time, I taught myself programming and was able to work with a guy named Scott Adams, who had a company called Adventure International, to convert his text-based adventure games from the Apple II to the Radio Shack computer, and end up, getting royalties for doing that. And that was my exposure to learning, because I like to learn by looking at someone else's code. And then happened to be living in Marin County, which is where Lucasfilm was based. And I did a book on computer animation called Computer Animation Primer. And in this book, we used the Atari 800 as the machine we were teaching animation for. And that meant that I got to, use work with Atari a little bit as a side thing. I mean, not with them directly, but, in terms of getting help on the book. And also going to the Lucasfilm computer division and learning what they were doing at the high end of computer animation. Got to meet the people. And a year later, I heard they were starting up this new games group. And I quickly contacted Ed Catmull, who was the head of the computer division. And he introduced me to Peter Langston, who was the person they had just hired to run it. And a few months later, I got to be the third person in the group, which became Lucasfilm Games and then became LucasArts. So I was really the first, I guess, games designer brought into the book, into the group, and was there from the very beginning.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was a bunch of weird coincidences. Not, partly, having a dream of someday working for Lucasfilm, because I love the movies, Star Wars movies. And another was choosing the Atari 800 to do for my computer animation book, which coincidentally Atari funded the initial Lucasfilm Games group with like $1 million. So my experience working on the Atari computer definitely helped. And and they're also Peter was looking for people who were not really embedded in the industry. He wanted people who hadn't been spoiled or corrupted or whatever by having worked in a large game company. So that was a plus I never had. And so everything just kind of clicked. And I happened to be, I lived 5 miles away from where the offices were. So lots of serendipity there.
Indeed. And you mentioned you worked with the computer animation division. Was that Pixar?
Well, it became Pixar. So the computer division was the group within Lucasfilm that was pretty much a research group, and they were doing a lot of looking into putting computer graphics into the movies. And it was a little early then to do it, but they were just starting to do some experiments. The first one that I saw around the time I was writing my book was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And there was this sequence called the Genesis device, where it was terraforming this planet. And all that was done in CG. And it was pretty state of the art. I mean, I think that was the first movie that had fractal landscapes and a bunch of other things that were just brand new. So that group stayed there as a research group for a while. And then at some point, not sure exact date, but Steve Jobs ended up buying that computer division, and that became Pixar.
Right. I remember reading about a lot of that. And shifting back to Lucasfilm Games, I assume since you were there at the beginning, you did work on the earliest games, like Ball Blazer and Rescue on Fractalus.
Right. So my game was Rescue. I did Rescue on Fractalus. Well, I should say I did it. I was the designer and the project leader on that. But I worked with Lauren Carpenter, who was my office mate for the first few months I was there, and he was the guy who in the computer division who had done the animated fractal landscapes. So as an office mate, one of the first things I asked him was whether there was any way he thought we could use a real-time fractal landscape inside of a video game. And his first reaction was, no way. And then he thought about it for a couple of days and came back with, borrowed a computer, Atari computer, took it home, learned 6502 assembly, and like 2 days later came back with a working prototype of, flying through a fractal landscape. And he was on loan to us from the computer division to help us implement that. And so that was pretty groundbreaking. David Levine was the one who did Ballblazer, and we shared an office for a while, and he went totally different direction with trying to leverage the power of the Atari computer to do this really cool 60 hertz, 60 frames per second landscape, which had never been. It was so unheard of that people were looking. I think when the press came in to see it for the first time, I saw people looking under the table for a Laserdisc player, figuring that it couldn't have been generated by the Atari. And so we had some really cool first two games. And then after that, the next one I did was Labyrinth, which was based on the Jim Henson movie. It was produced by Lucasfilm, so that was our first attempt at taking a film and adapting it into an adventure game.
And,
Interesting.
Labyrinth is the very first adventure game Lucasfilm Games ever did. Like, it predates Maniac Mansion.
Right.
So given that, how did you go about designing that particular title, given that, we're talking even like before Scum here?
Yeah, this is pre-Scum. We knew we had the story, we had access to video, but what we ended up getting to do was a group of us went to London for a week and got to brainstorm with Douglas Adams, who was a friend of Jim Henson's, and Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fame. And that was pretty amazing. I was totally intimidated and it felt like I couldn't talk. I think I was just in awe too much. I just kind of had to sit back and take notes and participate as much as I could, but it was really fast. So him plus a guy named Christopher Surf, who was involved with the Muppets and Children's Television Workshop, was there. And then Brenda Laurel, who was our producer from Activision. This is before Lucasfilm was publishing their own titles. And Charlie Kellner, who was our lead for the technical end of the game. Steve Arnold, who was our general manager. I think Noah Falstein was there. And I was just, got all these great ideas. And I had to go back home and it was up to me to figure out how to take everything that we talked about for a week and convert it into a design we could actually complete around the time the movie came out. And that was probably a bigger challenge. But we also, obviously, since we didn't have anything like Scum, everything was coded by hand in 6502 or with an assembler, 6502 macro assembler that we had. And it was fun, but it was probably, the first part was fun, but I think the game itself was probably maybe the most difficult game I did, just because of the deadline, kind of coming out of the project with the idea of having to do it a certain way, match it, and a bunch of other little things that just made it a difficult project. But and then the movie itself at the time, I don't think was a huge success, which meant that the game wasn't going to be able to pick up any, any push from the movie that much. I think now the movie is considered, I think, a cult classic, but at the time it was not a huge success.
I can tell you that HBO played a big part in helping the reputation of Labyrinth, because we actually had HBO in the 80s, and I remember Labyrinth playing on that channel quite a lot, actually. I mean, that's how a lot of these movies, got their status in the first place. Syndication, cable, and whatnot. But yeah, I imagine at the time that Labyrinth didn't do too well.
I don't think it was panned. I just don't think it was a huge commercial success. It's a strange movie. I mean, even thinking back on it, there's some really strange stuff going on.
Definitely. And as far as the game goes, I don't hear anyone talk about it.
I actually didn't know there was one until you mentioned it.
Yeah, I was about to say people who even know about the Labyrinth game is pretty rare on its own.
Right. I think it was only released, I can't remember if it was on anything other than the Commodore 64. It probably did have a European release, but I think partly because the movie wasn't a huge hit, Activision probably didn't want to put a whole bunch of money into marketing it, figuring it wasn't going to be that successful anyway. So it didn't have a huge audience. I've definitely read met people and talked to people who loved the game, and I guess the game could be the first graphic adventure that was at least in the direction of a point and click type game where we weren't, it really wasn't text input. We didn't have a parser, and it was all done graphically, except for the very opening, which was a Douglas Adams joke. His idea was to start the game kind of like the way the Wizard of Oz movie started in black and white, to have the game start in the equivalent of black and white for graphic adventures, which was a text adventure. And then, very early on, you'd be teleported into the video part, the visual part of the game, which was in the labyrinth itself, and then from there would be full interactivity. It's kind of fun. I think I was afraid that people would say, well, "Hey, wait a second! This is supposed to be a graphic adventure game. How come I'm stuck in a text adventure right now?" And I don't know if people. I mean, since we didn't have the internet back then like we do now, I really couldn't read much in the way of reviews and see how people responded to it.
I honestly couldn't attest to Labyrinth's quality because I have not played the game. If there's any, unless you get the old floppies, there's no way to play it in this day and age.
You could probably, you could probably play it on a C64 emulator, and for sure you could go on YouTube and find videos of it.
Probably.
Yeah. Everything.
Yeah. So what was your next project after Labyrinth?
Well, the next one was Maniac Mansion. So Ron and Gary had been working on the design of Maniac Mansion for about a year. And Ron also built the Scum system, the Scum engine, so we could do scripting with a high level, very easy to read language, as opposed to having to hand code it in 6502 like we did with Labyrinth. And he asked me, knowing that I had come off a project and I was in the middle of stuff, he asked me if I would be interested in being the scripter for this. I figured it would take a couple of months to complete. And I said, sure, sounds like fun. So I did, and I scripted most of the game. And the design was pretty rough. They knew what the main points were going to be, what the objects were going to be, and kind of the layout of the mansion was pretty much set. But the actual, what do you say, or what's going to happen when you pick up this object, and how is it going to work exactly? A lot of that was totally up to me for most of it. So I did a lot of the cutscenes. I did most of the wiring up all the rooms, and a lot of that. And it was, I think I was on it for like 6 months, and even when at the point I had to leave the project to go on something else, I think it went on for a couple of months after that. So it was really fun working with Ron and Gary on that. And that was probably the first project I worked with Ron on. He'd been there for a year or two before that. And Gary I'd worked on both Rescue and Labyrinth, so he knew him. And it was mostly fond memories, other than the time of overwhelm when we realized that we probably shouldn't have had so many different characters you could choose at the beginning, which is orders of magnitude more difficult having come up with making sure to work with no matter who you chose. But it was a good game. It was because of my experience using it. I wanted to do my own adventure game using the same system. So that's when I got to do Zach McCracken in the Alien Mindbenders next, and used Scum, I guess version 2 of Scum, as the basis for that. And so again, I was the designer on that one, and had a co-designer, Matthew Kane, who did the music and also worked with me on the coding of the game. And that was probably the closest to my heart in terms of the stuff I was really interested in. Kind of very new agey, but wacky, tongue-in-cheek, and a lot of fun on that one. Then after that, we used Scum again for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and that was the second time we got to do a film-based game. Also some stress because we had a very hard deadline because we wanted to get the game done around the time the movie was going to come out, so it was like 6 months away. And so we put 3 designers on it, and it was me, Ron Gilbert, and Noah Falstein, and kind of split up the game into different parts and then kind of worked together to get that completed in time. And I think that was the last game that I did in that manner. There was I was producing another title that was called Pipe Dream, which was a title which we acquired, and then for a year I was the director of operations. To the point where the games group was now a division and was officially Lucasfilm Games and was about to become LucasArts. And we had just been growing a lot, and I helped by hiring heads of different groups and kind of helping to put together a structure that wasn't there. Everyone was reporting into our general manager before, and it was just overwhelming for him to do that. So I helped with that. It was not a lot of fun for me to do that. I was much more interested in doing the creative stuff. So I think I'm credited in a few games that came out during that period, even though I really didn't contribute a whole lot to them. And then the last 2 years I was there, I got to actually do a location-based entertainment title, which was really what I was hoping to do when I first got there. And it was a kind of a simulator style game working with Hughes Simulation, which is the company that does or did professional flight simulators. So they did the technical part of it, and we did the design and the creative, and got to play in this, $1 million flight simulator playing a Star Wars game that I designed. and that was probably the best game I got to play at the time. It was really cool. Huge, 120-degree screen. There was a collimating mirror, which meant you were focusing out at hundreds of feet in front of you rather than just a few feet away. So it felt like you were flying over these vast landscapes. And we had surround sound. There were 2 seats inside of it. We had an Amiga computer as a heads-down display, and an Evans and Sutherland image generator to generate the 3 video projector screens, that were projecting the image. And unfortunately, the idea was that this would go into theme parks or whatever, and it just turned out to be just too expensive at the time for anyone to actually want to implement it someplace. So that project closed down, and I left the company. So I was there for about 10 years.
Pretty impressive tenure.
It was fondly remembered, which is why when Ron and Gary started doing Thimbleweed Park, and after we saw the Kickstarter was going to be successful, asked me if I wanted to come on board and help code it. And much in the same way that it was Ron and Gary leading the project as they did with Maniac Mansion, I got to be the first scripter on this too. So that was fun. Didn't have to hesitate at all to do it. I said, yes, absolutely, I want to do it.
Right.
And when it turned out, we got Mark Ferrari to do a lot of the backgrounds, and other people that were just, the whole team was just really amazing. It was, I think the only hesitation was, would this be a letdown because it wasn't going to be as fun as the stuff we did when I was at Lucas. And I think after maybe 10 minutes of the first brainstorming session, that was no longer a worry. Everything just kind of fell into place right away, as if we had just continued working together, 25 years later, and it still worked really well.
It's amazing how that works out. It's like, now, we actually had Ron and Gary on the program like a couple years ago. Like, it was pretty early in the production of Thimbleweed Park, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Really great interview, and I had wanted to get them back on the program, to talk about the finished Thimbleweed Park, but sadly their schedule didn't allow for it. So
we're still working on the game, even though the game launched at the end of March. We're still in the middle of it. We're working on the iOS and Android versions, and doing a bunch of stuff like that. And so hopefully, in a month or two, everything will be complete, and their schedule, if they're not totally burned out, their schedule will be freed up to talk. I'm still doing stuff. I'm still working on it too, but more like maybe half time at this point.
Right. Well, that makes sense because, like stuff like the scripting and everything is done.
Yes. Yeah. So Ron's doing, very involved with the mobile versions, and he's involved with the engine coding. The scripting is pretty much, there really isn't much. A couple of little things pop up. Every once in a while you get a bug. Say, oh, no one ever tried that before, and we get to fix those. Those could be a little challenge, but I think by this point it's been, most of those were resolved in the first week after we launched.
Yeah, and
we just did an update a couple weeks ago where we added a whole in-game hint system, and that was some of the feedback we got in the reviews, was that, especially people who were more interested in, I guess, who are more casual gamers as opposed to hardcore adventure gamers, who wanted to be able to get hints within the game. So you saw that on the video I'm watching there. There was a little question mark on the post office. Is this a video or are you guys doing this live?
Oh, yeah, this is live.
Yeah, this is live gameplay.
Okay, so if you go back in the front of the post office, there was like a poster with a question mark on it. And that's the advertisement for the hint line where you can call up and on a phone and get hints about where you are in the game, what you might want to try to do. And it's done as a progressive hints, kind of very similar to what Lucas did at, for the 1-900 lines where you actually had to pay $1 a minute to get hints. Here it's free. And we try to do it in a way where you aren't going to get spoiled. You can get a very, very obscure hint, and then it gets more and more specific based on where you are. So you just have to use the phone and you can call. And so that was pretty massive. Then the other thing we just did was added dialogue between the main characters, which wasn't in the original release. And that allowed, I think it filled in some gaps in the story. And especially for Ransom the Clown, who's pretty much an asshole, explains why he ends up helping the other people to do what they need to do. And I think it just makes it feel more complete.
I don't think I've tested that out yet. I haven't had time to get back to Thimbleweed. No.
Well, we have a week now, so maybe we will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. But so what other updates do you have planned to Thimbleweed?
Well, there is this arcade. There's an arcade on one of the streets that's been closed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard rumors that may be opened up at some point. And I think that's mostly it. I don't know of anything else which is changing other than getting it on the other platforms I mentioned.
Okay. Now, has this game come out on the Xbox One yet?
Yes. So it was launched on Xbox One, Windows, Mac, and Linux all at the same time.
That's a lot of platforms to support at once.
Right. It was a lot. Well, the ones on Steam, most of those pretty much, once the engines were working okay, that pretty much just worked. Then there was a few things like getting it, the other feature where you can, if you have an Xbox version, and you can play it with your Windows version if you buy it from the Microsoft Store. That was something we added, but wasn't there at initial release. And it's on the Mac App Store also. And each one, I didn't have to, that wasn't my area. I didn't have to do a whole lot there. That was really mostly Ron and some of our people who were responsible for the conversions.
And I don't know, are they looking at releasing it on the PlayStation 4 or the Switch?
I can't say anything about any other versions other than the Android and the iOS ones. Nothing else has been announced yet.
Gotcha. Right. So, shifting back to the actual development of the game, how did building Thimbleweed Park with all the modern tools and everything compared to building Maniac Mansion?
Wow. Well, there is a huge difference. Having a powerful computer that can run it in in 2 seconds, you load it up and it's running again. Maniac Mansion, we had Sun workstations, which we were doing the compiling on. Then it would compile the code, in maybe a minute or so, download the code to the Commodore 64 target machine, probably onto writing it out onto the floppy disk. Then you'd have to boot the game up and load it off the floppy. So anytime you made a change, there was 3 to 5 minutes before you could test it. Right now it's like 2 seconds. That's a huge change. There's, I think initially there really wasn't much of a debugger. Now, obviously, we could do that. We could, look at variables and code and have some control there. Single stepping and other things. The biggest change probably was the feeling that there weren't really any technical limitations. Back then you had a limitation of like, was it 3 people, 2 or 3 characters in one scene? That was it. Now there's no limit. We might have done some animation, on screen animation, like the clock in the main mansion hall clicking, having its pendulum going back and forth. That's about as much animation as we could do. Now, obviously, there's, you could do pretty much anything you wanted to. So every star in the sky is a separate object which is animating, and there's a separate script running for each of the stars to flash them randomly. And so you have a star room with like 200 stars. That each one there's a separate little script that's running in the background. Or if you go to the circus, all the lights that are flashing are done that way. And all that animation doesn't really have much of an effect on frame rate. They're all running full out. So it's kind of fun to be able to do anything you want without having to worry about a budget of CPU bogging down or something. So sound effects, or voice. I mean, obviously we didn't have voice. The sound effects were kind of crappy C64 sounds, and now we're just doing mostly digital sound effects from samples. Now we have everything's fully voiced. So it's kind of, I like what Ron says. It's kind of the way, if you think back to those games, you kind of fill in all those details in your mind, and kind of expect that that's what we had back then, but we didn't. It was very blocky graphics, and you fill the rest of that in with your imagination. And now, because people expect it, you have a lot less that we have to fill in, so we have to make sure it works well. So it's still done with as low resolution, so not everything has to be animated. If you have one character give another character an object, we're not graphically showing the object being transferred between the two of them. Usually just a gesture, and because it's in this style from the early 90s, I'd say, that kind of works. It does. People aren't saying, "Hey, how come I don't see the camera being transferred between the two people?" So like these two characters you can talk to and have them talk to each other. So all this is new dialogue that we went back into the studio and recorded. And it changes based on where you are in the game. And it's usually not there for hints or it's more for backstory and for fleshing out their characters.
That's nifty.
Yeah.
So we are getting kind of low on time here, so we're going to shift a bit to RubeWorks.
Okay.
All right. So for those who might not know what this particular project is, can you inform the audience?
Sure. There's this.
So I believe we have a trailer of this. Give us a moment to switch the footage.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what it was while you're switching it.
All right.
This is before I worked on Thimbleweed Park. It was really the first game I did after a huge break from the games I was doing back in the early 90s. And I've always been enamored with Rube Goldberg machines and chain reaction machines and the humor. I actually remember Rube Goldberg cartoons when I was growing up. They'd be in the comics, in the Sunday paper. And I wanted to create kind of a chain reaction machine game, but actually use Rube Goldberg's cartoons as the inspiration for these. So I got the license from Rube Goldberg's granddaughter and his heirs, and that's what we did. So it's a game we launched in 2013. At the end of 2013, for on Steam for Mac, Linux, and Windows, and also for mobile for Android and iOS. And it's it's being used a lot in schools. A lot of schools have their students build Rube Goldberg machines as a introduction to physics and chain reactions.
Yeah, I made one in engineering class back in high school.
Yeah, see? And if you had this game, it would have been easier. It kind of gets people in the mode where, because you can, do trial and error, but fix the problems really fast without having to take half an hour to rebuild your machine when it doesn't work the first time.
Especially when the pegs break on the little connector things, and then they have to look for new ones.
Yep. Yeah. And it's, in real life, when you do it, everything has to be exactly in the right place, and a breeze coming in at the wrong time could throw it off if it's not.
Or if somebody accidentally bumps into the table.
Exactly. Right. So doing it as an app means that a lot of that part of the frustration goes away, and it's really purely problem solving. And the kids who play it, and adults too, get kind of by the third level, I think they kind of get into Rube Goldberg's mind and start thinking of really funny things they can do. So, yeah, is that, you want to play the trailer?
Yeah, I was gonna switch the audio over.
Okay.
Right, and that's been out for a couple years now, correct?
Yeah, it came out 11, 12, 13.
That is sure is some old-timey music.
Yeah. And Rube Goldberg was a cartoonist back around, I think his heyday was like maybe the 1930s and 40s.
Sounds about right.
He died around 1970 or 71, and he was like probably the biggest cartoonist of his era. He did cartoons. He wrote screenplays. He wrote the first Three Stooges movie. He ended up writing songs. He was a performer on vaudeville stage, doing cartoons, and he eventually did political cartoons, and then was a sculptor towards the end. So he had this huge, long career. And most of his cartoons, I think he had 50,000 different cartoons that he penned during his lifetime. And only a portion of them were these chain reaction machines. He actually had strips that he would do the stories. But I only knew him for these, and just wanted, loved doing it, and loved working with his granddaughter, with Jennifer George, doing this, so that it captured the essence of his humor.
Have you ever considered doing a sequel to this app?
Possibly. I'm not sure. I mean, it's a lot more fun working with the team. So if it was between doing a Rube Goldberg sequel and doing another game with Ron and Gary, I think I would choose that. Or going in a totally different direction. And I've been spending time looking at VR and augmented reality and MR, and that might be what I do next, depending on how things go. Getting closer to my interactive Disneyland idea. Now you could do a lot more of what I had dreamed way back 30, 35 years ago. So
Like, I would say, like, a VR, like the HTC Vive Rube Goldberg style thing would be kind of interesting, where you could use, like, play space mechanic thing.
Yeah, well, that would be if I were to do a Rube Goldberg game, that would be a much more fun way to do it, where you could pick up things with your hand and move things around and do it in a room space experience.
And do you see yourself working on another adventure game after Thimbleweed?
Possibly. I mean, adventure games are hard. It took us over 2 years to do this one, and it wasn't a huge team, but it was still very complicated, and to get them right is a lot of work. But yeah, I would if I don't know if I'd do it on my own. I think doing it with Ron, Gary, and the other people on the team would really be fun. But I have no idea if that's what I would do next. I think it depends on how successful the movie park is.
Well, how's it been doing so far?
I think it's been doing well. It's interesting because I have a feeling that we're going to end up with a bigger proportion of the audience will be on mobile, and if that's the case, then it's only a small fraction of the people who actually have ended up with it. So I'm thinking this is going to have long legs, as they say. So it's going to be around for years, and people still. It blew me away when I realized that people are still playing our old games from the late 80s and early 90s.
Oh yeah, a lot of them are still even collectible. So yeah.
Yeah. I at the time we did those games, we all assumed that they'd have a 1 or 2 or 3 year lifespan, and as the computers that they were built for bit the dust or got replaced, that people would stop playing them. And we just didn't think about emulators and people, the team that put together ScumVM and all the other things that happened to keep those games still in the public eye. So who knows? Now you have the feeling if you do a game, it could last for decades if it's a good game. And I think most people who played Thimbleweed Park are comparing it. I feel like it's in the same at the same level of a lot of the old games that we did. Comparing it to, I think it's probably the best adventure game I ever worked on for sure.
I definitely enjoyed my time with Thimbleweed Park, and I hope it does well. There's not many direct throwbacks to the old LucasArts sets. And I mean the really old Maniac Mansions and Zach McCracken's of the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, you get Day of the Tentacle and stuff like that remastered, but there's not been something new.
Yeah, and that was definitely a really faithful to the idea game.
You can get most of those on, somewhere now for legally. I know that Zach is on GOG. I know that Maniac Mansion is embedded in Day of the Tentacle, so you can actually play it there. And I'm not sure. I assume Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade is available someplace, but
I think there's been rights issues with the Indiana Jones stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember checking to see if it was out. I know, and I don't think Maniac Mansion and Zach were never. Well, Maniac Mansion was never updated to 256 color. Zach was, so that one at least people can play that for. But there's no voice. It was never upgraded with voice acting. So it's pretty much the way it was back in like 1990.
And some people prefer that.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that it's about all we have time for this session. David, I thank you very, very much for taking time out of your schedule and joining us to talk about Thimbleweed Park and your career. hopefully we'll have you back on the program, whenever your next project is off the ground and ready to be talked about.
That sounds great.
All right.
Or maybe try to get the team back after we finish all the production on Thimbleweed Park 2. Then you get to reveal all the secrets that we can't talk about.
Indeed. All right. I look forward to it.
Good.
All right.
Okay. Thank you all.
No problem. All right. Petty fan, play us to the next segment. And I said I had to end the interview, but we do have a topic of discussion to get to. We're going to talk about the SNES Mini. If you've been living under a rock, I will happily inform you that Nintendo has finally done what we knew they were going to do last week and unveiled the Super NES Mini, or Classic, or whatever you want to call this device. It's the Super NES and Super Famicom Classic, because they are releasing region-specific versions each territory, which means
as they did with the NES/Famicom Mini.
Right. Which means we're getting the ugly box again. Europe's getting the Super NES.
The Europe one is the same as the US one this time.
Except in design. It has the Famicom design, but with the Super NES name. That's
that was just the hardware they were talking about where I saw that?
Yes. They had the Super Famicom design, and the Super Famicom is the Super Famicom in Japan.
Although there's less of a design difference this time. Because the controller ports were the same. The controllers were the same, except for the buttons were different colored. It's just that the body was a little bit more rounded.
Right. And of course, there have been raging debates about, which version is the best. Because a lot of people really, really hate the North American design of the Super NES.
I liked it, but nostalgia.
Right. The European one concerns me because of hertz differences. Mm-hmm. If those games are 50 hertz, automatically the worst version.
I believe I saw an article that said that it's going to be literally exactly the same software as the US version.
It's the same software, but not the same frame rate. PAL is a different frame rate than NTSC.
That's what I was saying. It's literally the exact same, including region version.
Yeah. I should hope so, because, you don't want the 50 hertz versions here. Oh, dear God, no. I'm like...
Painful flashbacks.
For Europeans, we didn't have to deal with that slow-ass hertz refresh. Believe me, the games were noticeably slower in 50 hertz. That's why... That's why the Europeans want the 60 hertz mode. Mm-hmm. So anyway, once again, if you haven't heard about the lineup, so the lineup's actually once again, it's fewer games. It's 21 games overall. And
but that's because they're Super Nintendo games. It's not a size issue, obviously. You could put the entire Super Nintendo library on a chip the size of your thumbnail these days. But it's there is way more time involved in the shorter number of games, in the smaller number of games on this, because none of them are just like one-screen games that you play for 15 minutes.
Right.
Also, there's a lot more third-party ones, I think, in this one.
It's hard to say, but there's a fair amount. There was a fair amount of third-party stuff in the NES Classic as well.
True.
But I mean, but that's another factor. See, when you play it, when you play the game legally, so to speak, all of these third-party titles had to be licensed out.
Mm-hmm.
And that costs money.
I think a couple of them Nintendo still owns the rights to because they, published them, but for the most part, they still had to license them out.
Well, yeah, anything Nintendo published, that they can publish again. Like it's their own stuff for the most part. It's but the point is, getting Contra 3, getting Final Fantasy 6. Fuck it, I'm not calling it Final Fantasy 3. I thought we ended this fucking debate years ago.
They might have. Well, that does. Well, for one thing, that does indicate that it's not a retranslated ROM, probably.
Yeah, I know why it isn't. I'm just not calling it Final Fantasy 6.
No. I agree with you that 3 is dumb.
Yeah, it's like, it's called Final Fantasy 3 because it's literally the same game we got in 1994.
Which is odd because they do have a translated ROM.
They do, but that's for the Game Boy Advanced version. So,
and I'll take the SNES soundtrack, thanks.
And clearly nobody wanted to spend the money to retranslate these things.
Mm-hmm. Well, the precedent on the NES Classic is it's literally a ROM box. Yeah. Although they're apparently doing something for this one because this one has a few Super FX games which have had issues with
Guys, before we get to that, let's go over the lineup itself because there are 21 games, but it's not an equal parsing once again. The Super NES is getting different games than the Super Famicom, and it's quite the interesting trade-off. So, what every version is getting are Contra 3, Donkey Kong Country, Final Fantasy 6, F-Zero, Kirby Superstar, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Mega Man X, Secret of Mana, Star Fox 2, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario RPG, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and Super Metroid. Now, what we're getting and what Europe is getting are Earthbound, Kirby's Dream Course, Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting, Super Castlevania 4, and Super Punch-Out. What Japan is getting in the Super Famicom is Fire Emblem, A Mystery of the Emblem, The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, Panel D Pawn, Super Soccer, and Super Street Fighter II: The New Challengers.
Why 2 different versions of Street Fighter 2 beats the hell out of me.
Only Capcom could explain this because I'm like, here's the hint. Japan's getting the better version because Super Street Fighter 2 was the version that introduced Cammy, Fei Long, DJ, and T-Hawk to the mix. So, the one with 4 extra characters alone is greater than the previous version that doesn't have those characters. And, of course, all the tweaks and bug fixes and Super Street Fighter 2 is generally considered to be the definitive Street Fighter game for the 16-bit consoles, both Genesis and Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the Super NES, but I'm like,
that was played by performance problems, wasn't it?
Oh God, it's a miracle you got that game running on a Super NES, but don't play that version. It's slow as shit. Anyway, so Street Fighter lunacy aside, I'd say ultimately we're getting the better package because, well, the weak link comes down to probably Kirby's Dream Course versus Super Soccer. I'm like Kirby's Dream Course is kind of would probably be the most suspect game in our package because good enough game, but you compare it to everything else and you've got a murderous row of stone cold classics going on here.
Yeah.
I'm like, Kirby's Dream Course is a pretty good game. It's not that level, but it's certainly better than Super Soccer. Like, we are just scratching our heads on Sunday figuring out why this game is here. Like, like I don't get it. I don't get it. And like was this game ultra huge in Japan in 1991, 1992? It's like, was this like, I never heard of this game. Like, I probably seen it and I probably heard about it, but it's got such a generic title that
Right.
you know, I probably forgot about it, 5 seconds after I saw the box art.
Yeah.
And it is pretty much exactly that. It's a soccer game.
Yeah, it's like, I can't even say it's a bad game or anything. It's just, you've got all these legendary games and cult favorites and everything, and I'm like, okay.
Soccer is popular in Japan, but it's also popular in Europe, so that doesn't really do a good job of explaining that.
I mean, if you were going to get like a sports game, couldn't you have got like one of the powerful pro baseball games? Like, at least I've heard of those. At least I know that's a very big deal in Japan. That would make sense to me. This does not.
Mm-hmm.
So that aside, it's it is a shame we're not getting Penalty Pond, but that's the fault of Nintendo for attaching the Tetris name to our version. We know Penalty Pond is Tetris Attack, so I'm like, on the other hand, I'm trying to figure out why Japan isn't getting Earthbound because of how big of a deal Mother is in that country. I'm like, these are things that are only known to the people working on this, and I doubt they are going to say anything. So anyway, getting back to what Galix was talking about, one of the big selling points here is this is the kind of legal ROM debut of the Super FX games, like Yoshi's Island and the Star Fox. This is the legal debut of Star Fox 2.
The full version.
It's like, it's like Dylan Kubert, who helped to work on the game back in the day, said on Twitter recently that the ROMs that have been floating around for I don't know, decade, 15 years, however long it's been, those are like that's like 90% complete. It's mostly there, but it's it's lacking the finality that this version has, because Star Fox 2 was literally completed.
Yeah, it was set to print, and then Nintendo pulled the plug.
Right. I mean, it was like at the literal last minute, Nintendo killed this in favor of Star Fox 64. Now, it's speculated as to the actual reasons why that happened. Maybe royalty disputes and what have you. But like, Star Fox 2 is finally going to see the light of day after 25 years of languishing in the dark. I'm like, and this isn't the first time this has happened recently, now is it?
No.
It's like,
Nope.
I'm like, it's like, we got to see if the Nintendo has any other decades-long unreleased games that
they
might
do, but that
I'm like,
involves getting a translation
we'll
first.
Yeah, I'm like,
we'll have to wait for them to come out with the Final Fantasy, or the no, not Final Fantasy, the Game Boy Advance mini classic.
Possibly.
I'm sure if they include Mother 3 on that, the hype is gonna be weapons grade.
Anyway, so anyway, the Super FX chip games have been noticeably absent from the virtual consoles. 3DS, Wii U. You can't find Star Fox or the Super NES version of Yoshi's Island. You get the Game Boy Advance version, which isn't as good because A, screen crunch, and B, Game Boy Advance fucking sound chip.
Also,
God
frame
damn.
rate issues still occur on the ROM.
Right.
Mhm.
It's been a while since I played that version. You know, like, but even that aside, this package, while it's missing a few things. I'm like, obvious. The big thing that's missing here is Chrono Trigger.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Mhm.
not gonna lie, and of course, also missing our DKC2, DKC3, Mega Man X2, Mega Man X3, and beyond that, I couldn't say anything is quote unquote missing from like the all-time Pantheon Classics collection that this mostly is.
Mhm.
Like maybe you could add more cult classics like Demon's Crest, for example.
Yeah, I personally would trade Super Ghouls and Ghosts for Demon's Crest, but
Right.
that would not necessarily go over that well because a lot of more people have heard of the one.
Mhm.
Right. Or like maybe get like Final Fight represented there, although the Super NES version was pretty terrible, so I'm not sad to see that not here. I mean, TMNT, Four Turtles of Time, as what you could add to the package. The list is quite lengthy because, well, the Super NES has one of the greatest libraries ever seen.
Mhm.
But I think they did do a very good job of picking most of the major classics.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I don't have a problem with the overall package here. And as noted, this thing is going to go for $80, and it's a much better value than the NES Classic because you've got longer games here. You got full-on RPGs like Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy VI, Super Mario RPG, and Earthbound, or Fire Emblem, depending on your region. These will take time, even if you played them before. And just in general, games got longer in the Super NES era. They took advantage of the the extra power, more storage space. Very much a like the full realization of what was going on in the 8-bit era. The transition from arcade gameplay to console gameplay.
Mm-hmm. And besides that, yeah, the arcade thing kind of comes up because over the lifespan of the NES was really when games with like more than one screen were developed.
Right. And that trend continued very much in the 16-bit era.
Right.
Now, and even the RPGs aside, like Super Mario World, for example, is the first mainline Mario game that had a save feature. The game was that big, or at least appeared that big. If you know what you're doing, you can complete the game in like 20 minutes. But,
oh yeah, well you can go to the final boss from like what 2-3 stages into Donut Plains.
Right, but that's not something you knew back in 1991.
Right.
Or if you knew, you had the guide, and the point. The point is, most of these games were a lot longer than their previous forebearers, and not all of them. Like Super Ghouls and Ghosts is pound for pound about the same length as any of the other Ghouls and Ghosts, and Contra 3 is also not a very long game.
Yeah, the lengths of the Ghouls and Ghosts and Contra games are measured primarily in lives.
Right. Not so much levels. It's like, ass-kicking difficulty was still a thing in the 16-bit era. Now, will you be able to buy one of these?
No.
Yeah. So Nintendo has said that they have pledged to make more of these than the NES Classic.
Unfortunately, that doesn't do shit against Amazon scalpers. Apparently, in the UK, they've like at least started trying to limit the number per account, but
yeah, well, yeah, Amazon had to institute a very strict one per customer policy just for because the scalpers are fucking out already. If you go on eBay, like right now, you will find listings for the Super NES Classic.
I saw one on Sunday for $400.
Yeah, it's like, so, we're already anticipating a repeat of what happened last year. And it's further compounded by the fact that Nintendo has already said the SNES Classic is going to be a 2017 only item. Like, after this year, it's not going to be in production. I suppose what will help is the system is being planned to be released September 29th. So that will give them more time to restock. But
but
I'm not sure how much that is going to help.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they didn't exactly restock the NES.
They expected this to be they expect the NES one to be a novelty, and like nobody buy it. God, were they wrong?
Yeah. And I suppose the question that beckons after that is, do you foresee an N64 Classic next year?
I don't think so.
I would expect more of a wait period at least.
Plus,
the N64 is where you start getting into there would be fewer games just because there aren't as many N64 games, and there are certainly fewer all-time classic N64 games.
I was going to say, and also, SNES and NES games can be emulated flawlessly now. We still have problems emulating N64. They'd basically be building a mini N64.
I'm like, actually, it's less of a problem than you think. Or rather, Nintendo knows how to emulate their own shit. Like, go and play some N64 games on the Nintendo Wii. They're better than the original releases. Can't say the same for the Wii U emulator, though. Whoever did that screen darkening shit needs to be fired.
Into the sun, please.
Yeah. I'm like, for those who don't know, the Wii U Virtual Console N64 and NES games have a very pronounced screen darkening effect on them. I'm not sure what the issue is there, but I'm like, it's pretty noticeable, and it does interfere with things. Like, but as far as a lineup of N64, I'm like, it wouldn't be as small as you think it would be.
Yeah, it's hurt because Microsoft owns Rare, but it's still, they'd have enough to make a N64 mini console.
Yeah. Oh, no, I know they would. It just wouldn't look... I mean, the number of games would be visibly smaller.
No, it wouldn't. I'm like I said, if we go by virtual console releases, both Wii and Wii U, there's about enough here to make about... to have enough titles about what the Super NES has. And once again, leaping a generation forward changes the game. Because, remember, we be getting games like Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. Games that are an order of magnitude bigger than what you usually find on the Super NES. I will grant you that depends on the actual kind of game. Like, seeing a Mario Party game there isn't going to be as long as a Zelda game. But, as you do. The point is, if you have 20, 25 N64 games floating around there, especially, rarities like Ogre Battle 64 and Harvest Moon 64, you'll have a pretty good value package there. Of course, the thing is, Nintendo would need to Oh, that's another thing that we didn't talk about. The Super NES Classic will have 2 controllers. As opposed to the one controller that the NES Classic had.
Yeah, we won't know if it'll be able to support the SNES multi-tap, but
I don't think
it probably won't. The only reason that that's relevant is there are at least 2 notably more than 2-player games on this in Mario Kart and Secret of Mana.
Yeah, especially Secret of Mana. Like, it's like, I don't foresee being able to do the 3-player multiplayer on that system.
It depends. If it's built like the NES Classic was, they might be able to hotwire in a adapter to use for controllers.
Mm.
It depends on the power output of the machine, for one.
I suppose you're probably going to have modders trying to do that because...
Oh, yeah, they will.
Yeah.
That's just what they do. Like, yeah, because modders are crazy.
And they're also probably trying to, test the voltage of the actual controller ports, because they might be able to just plug, wire one in manually, a multi-tap, and then they're off to the races.
Right. But yeah, the N64 Classic, would not have access to a lot of, most of the rare games. Like, the only one they can be able to use is Donkey Kong 64, because even, like, Diddy Kong Racing, has Banjo and Conquer in it. Like,
so, yeah, they do have to license that from Microsoft, or we'd go without.
Yeah. Or they'll have to pull some additional licensing in case they, for some reason, want to get Mickey Speedway USA on the service. Yeah, that's the rare game nobody remembers.
Honestly, getting the licenses of the rare stuff will probably be cheaper than Disney. Because Disney.
As far as the third-party situation, we're in some interesting territory here. Okay, you've got some companies that are still alive, like Konami. Like, Konami not only has their own stuff for the N64, but Hudson, like Bomberman 64, was provided on the Virtual Console for the Wii U this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are options. Now, like, the biggest supporters of the N64 back in the day, besides Konami and Hudson, were the likes of Midway and Acclaim. And
whose names you might recognize from Tombstone somewhere.
Yeah. They have a crippling case of not being alive anymore. I'm like...
And their assets have been scattered to the winds.
Right. And... and the question, it's like, because, some of the games are in the hands of new publishers. We know them. Like, we know Throwback Entertainment. We know Night Dive Studios. Between both of them, they have access to the lion's share of the Claim's back catalog. Mm-hmm. And most of Midway's stuff is in the hands of Warner Brothers. But I'm like, I don't know. It's like Nintendo really hasn't worked with any American third parties on these mini things. We haven't seen any like Western like Western third party games on the Wii U Virtual Console. So I don't know if that's possible. Like it's not an impossibility to get like the Turok games or Shadow Man or Forsaken, or the Rush games onto the console. Like, the new licensors exist. It's, how willing is Nintendo to go down that road? Anyway, so we are running low on time here. Any final thoughts on the SNES Mini?
Get one if you can, but don't murder somebody.
Yeah, I think it looks like they did an even better job than they did with the NES Classic, and I really hope they don't make them completely impossible to get. And I think that only doing them for 3 months is very dumb. But how do I know how corporations decide on things?
I like what I see so far. Yeah, it's like like what I see, and I'm hoping they don't run out.
They will. They're already
Yeah,
out,
they
probably.
Yeah. Most of those games are ones that I either have fond memories of from childhood or have fond memories of wishing I was able to play. So
Well, of note, this is an $80 console, and the games on it alone are more than worth it. A few of them are several $100s.
some of them were $80 to start with when you
Yeah.
bought them, but that's just because things in the Super NES days were ridiculously expensive because that's how cartridges are.
Yeah, we've discussed that.
Right. So that'll about do it for not just this installment, but this season of Fragments of Silicon. Now, for those who have been listening, we thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll be there in season 8. Before we get to season 8, we still have MSP happening, not just this week, but it's happening during the break, and then it goes on break when we come back for Fragments. Like,
Because schedules.
Yes, because Max scheduled.
Indeed. Speaking of MSP, coming up next, we are going to be interviewing Jesse Cox. Gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, and
Fireworks, yay!
Fireworks! Congratulations, fireworks!
yes, like and during the the last 2 shows are going to be Brad Jones, the Cinema Snob, and Rebecca Heineman, who
you might remember from this show.
Yeah, it's like,
And
I was asked.
Boygas.
It's like I was asked to dig into some of my old contacts because we had a few slots left over, and I could handle them because we're going on break. So there we are. Anyway, we will be coming back. Let's see, the week of July 25th. So pretty much at the end of the month. Let's see. Should I announce the schedule here? I mean, might be forgotten.
We can do it when we do come back for our review.
I suppose we could do it on the on the MSP show like the week before.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so with that in mind, until next season, I wish you good gaming.
Alrighty, if you want to go bump the guest out, Adam,